Okay, since we're almost ready to get started, what I want to do is to just introduce myself. I think you all know me. I'm Dennis Deavenport. At least you know my name now. I got started diving in 1990, and from almost day one, I was shooting the camera. And it didn't take very long to figure out that I sucked at it. And I kept trying, and I still sucked for a long time. 1998, I joined HUPS in 1998, and I still sucked. But I had a lot of company, a lot of us did. But I also had a lot of support there. HUPS is Houston Underwater Photographic Society. We've been around for quite a long time. As it turns out, I got a little bit better as time went along because I had a lot of support, and I kept entering contests. Eventually, I started entering and winning some of the contests, which were all slide back then. We had some extraordinarily good people that would win all the time, so it was difficult to get in. I think David would nod his head on that one for sure. He and I think joined about the same time, and we're following along on similar trajectories. But then the digital hit back in the, I guess, mid 2006 or so, something like that. And everybody really wanted to get started with it, but nobody understood anything, and everybody sucked at it. And so everybody wanted to be a HUPS member, and our membership grew rapidly, and we started trying to learn and to tell people how to use the equipment that they were buying and had no idea what to do with. That now is the standard. I don't know of hardly anybody now that's still shooting slides. There are still why. So why videography? In my case, it's because I really enjoy telling stories, and this is a great way to do it. From a very early days, I had a movie camera up in the panhandle of Texas, and it didn't take me long to figure out that a movie camera up in the panhandle on the plains was kind of stupid. Nothing was moving around up there. So, but anyway, I had a camera and I enjoyed that. When I got to HUPS and kept doing stills and stills and stills, eventually that little red button on the back of my camera started attracting my attention, and people like Tom Collier and others were starting to encourage me to use it. And so I started using it. And of course, I sucked at that too for a while. And part of it was me, part of it was just not understanding what the camera was capable of doing. But a lot of it was also that the cameras back then were very compromised when it came to doing things underwater. And that's why we're here today, is to find out how to use the new equipment that is capable of doing all of this stuff very well and very capably underwater. For the past 3 years, I've been involved with the Houston Underwater Film Festival. I've entered, I've won a little bit, I've entered other contests around the world, had some success with it, but I'm in no way going to ever win an Emmy. I'm too old for that, and probably not good enough, but I really do enjoy it. And I'll continue to do it as long as I can. My motivations, we'll talk about that as we go forward. Okay, all you Zoomers out there in Zoom land, I see some people out there. Thanks for logging in. I do apologize that some of the scuba forums out there that were spreading my early 3 workshop version were getting the wrong information out. I just didn't have enough time in my schedule to do 3 workshops, and everything going on with HUPS was also compressed, so we decided to do it in one day. I don't plan to skip anything. I just compressed it down. Hopefully it's going to be something that you can understand and appreciate, and I hope you have a great time today. So I'm going to unshare right now, and I'm going to see how many people we have here. Jim Beeson, one of my old friends from down in Cuba. Can you come online and introduce yourself? Hit your space bar, Jim. All right.
Okay, I think I've got it now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm Jim Basin. I'm pretty old. I started actually diving for the first time when I finished graduate school in 1966, and that was on the California coast. And I moved from there to Indiana, and from Indiana to Chicago, and I was diving and teaching diving all that time. Then I moved to Utah, then back to Oklahoma, and now down to Texas. So I've kind of been around.
Okay. We're going to have to do it pretty quickly because I've got to get a 2-hour program. Paul, over there, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Paul Crocker in Dallas. I've been diving since '96, taking pictures since about 2003. Actually, no, 2000 early-ish. Started off with a Canon point and shoot, went to SLR, and back to TG6 now.
Okay, TG6, so I'm going to be talking about that. Ronald, one of my guys that are going to go to Raja Ampat with later on.
Yes, I started diving back in the early 70s, and I was fascinated with some underwater photography I saw, and I found out it's not near as easy as the pictures look. I tell you what,
Oh, it is.
I'm just all awesome. All the pictures you guys take are just awesome. That's it. I'm just a photographer wannabe, but I just love it.
Candace Campanelli, come online.
Hi, Candace Campanelli from the Clear Lake area, League City, and been diving since, I don't know, since I was 12. I don't remember what year it was, but it's been a while, been all over the Caribbean, love it. That's about it.
Okay, Julie Ross. Hit your space bar. What about you?
Right. Well, I live in Scotland, but I dive a lot in Aruba because I have family that live there. I've been diving. I've sort of dived Bonaire and places like that, which has been great. Still a very much beginner. I like stills, but I prefer video. And I'm here to learn. That's 100% here to learn. So as much information as you can all help me with, that would be fantastic.
So you got to know us through Justin, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, he's here too. Hi there, Justin.
Guilty.
Hi, Justin.
Hey.
How you doing?
Awesome.
Good.
Suzanne, we met over in Philippines.
Yeah, I started diving very late in my 50s, and now sorry for my English because I live in Vienna and I'm German, and I recently bought a Sony R5, so now I want to learn also video. Thanks for that.
Justin, give us a little bit about yourself, like nobody knows you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justin Wallace, originally from Trinidad and Tobago. Live in Houston. Been diving since 2015, just haven't stopped yet. Super addicted. I shoot a full frame Nikon D850 and been a member of HUPS for about 4 years now.
Turn it way down.
On a few competitions. So Dennis is definitely the right person for this, and he's my guru. So we're in good hands today.
Hey, Barry and Jody over there in Arizona. Say hi.
Hi, I'm Jody. I think we met you, Dennis, because we were over in the Philippines when the volcano erupted and you were interested in knowing what it was like because you were on your way there. So that was kind of the coincidence of how we met. I've been diving since 2007 after our kids were all grown up. And I did not start taking photos though until about 7 years later, I think in 2014. I think that's about when I started. I was mostly, Barry will introduce himself and tell more about his history, but mostly I was his spotter and critter finder at first.
Barry.
I'm here to learn more about video.
Oh,
Barry.
hi, Dennis.
Yeah.
Am I on?
The other half of the team.
Hi. Anyway, yeah, we've been diving since, like she said, our kids got out of the house. I started with a camera right away because wanted to share what we see underwater with other people on top. And a rough go of it for a long time. And eventually I'm shooting a Olympus now, M1 Mark II underwater. And real happy. And I try using the video things. I've sent you some videos and they're pretty rough. So I'm looking to get a lot better at it.
Sorrel, I see you're logged on twice here, or were. Sorrel is our, he's part of our HUPS group.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the first time, so I had to log off and log on again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Let me see, I got Joe Haas, he's also a HUPS member. Hello, Joe. Well,
Hello there.
there you are.
I started diving in 1957, so things have changed a little bit.
Yeah, it has a lot. And Martin is my wingman here. Martin, can you talk a little bit?
I'm just here to help Dennis.
Well, Martin, nothing good happens without Martin around here. As I say, he is my wingman. He is actually the wingman for HUPS almost anytime we do anything. Victor, you're from Portugal. Talk to us.
Yeah, we are a couple. I'm Victor and my girlfriend is driving our car, Alexandra, and we start diving recently across Indonesia, Nusa Penida, Philippines, and Ahab. And we start shooting our films using GoPro, and we want to know more to start being pros.
Mitch, I don't know where you're from, but talk to us.
Hi, yeah. So I'm from Boston. I'm a tech diver up here. Also cave diver and scuba instructor on the side. But yeah, I'm looking to learn more about underwater video.
How did you learn about this workshop?
I believe you know David Linderman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family friend.
Believe
Chris Ann Baker. Hi there.
Hi. Let's see. I don't dive. I have an ear problem and I've been snorkeling since I was 4. My first underwater video experience was taking a 2.0 digital camera and throwing it overboard a ferry wrapped in duct tape and a Ziploc baggie, and it worked. And I've been hacking ever since. Actually, I graduated to a GoPro and then I stepped back to an iPhone because they do such great work in terms of snorkeling.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to share the screen now with my presentation and we'll get started with it. I thank you all for joining and hopefully looks like we got a good crowd today. If I screw things up, Martin will make sure that I fix it. Okay, are you able to see what I've got or am I sharing screen or not? No?
I'm not sharing as yet.
Okay, I'm not sharing, right? That's what. Okay, sharing.
Who's in the who's at Bayland Community Center?
Who all? Gosh, we got what, about 25 people here. I see Scott. I see a lot of people. How many? 15 people here, which is not bad. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started. Okay, this is the underwater video workshop for dummies and not dummies, and I'm not trying to denigrate anybody, but we all start somewhere. What we're going to be doing today, it's an introduction to simple video practices and some not so simple. And it's geared mostly for beginning and intermediate videographers, but I think there's something for everyone here. What's going on here? Okay. Please shut off your microphone, activating your mute buttons. If you do have a question though, go ahead and hit the mute button, come online, ask your question, and I'll try to answer it. If I have answers, that'll be good. If I don't, maybe somebody else will. If time is getting away from us, I'll ask you to wait until after we're done, and then we can talk about it later. I have a lot to cover, so here we go. What are you going to expect today? First of all, it should be about 2 hours with a break at the midpoint. I'll show the film at that point. The scope is to focus on the practical underwater techniques and trying to get everybody to improve just what comes out of the camera. We aren't going to be talking about assembling films, and we're not going to be talking about editing. That will be something for later workshops if we get to that. We're only going to be talking about what does it take to get good video out of your camera. So, as I said, we're going to be focused on, I call it the 3 deadly hallows of underwater videography. Accurate color, stability, and getting good critical focus. We're going to be talking about gear. As far as cameras are concerned, I've broken it down into action cameras like the GoPros and the other DJIs and things like that. Point and shoot cameras like the Olympus cameras and the Sea Life cameras, advanced SLR systems, but we're going to be dealing with lighting and tripods and also red filters and diopters. So how are we going to progress? We're going to go from equipment, underwater videography will be discussed, and the content is going to be breaking down, as I said before, into good accurate color, stability, and critical focus. Each section will be broken down into the 3 different type of camera points: action cameras, point and shoots, and higher end SLRs. So why do we do this? Everyone has their own motivations, and I can't say what it should be for anyone else. I can just say what my motivations are. It might just be because it's fun and everyone else is doing it, or it might be because it excites you and I'd like to know more. In my case, I like to tell stories. I like to let my creativity run wild, and experimenting is always exciting to me. Or you might be just, I'd like to show it to my friends and my family, or on social media like Facebook or TikTok or Instagram. It could be that you're already pretty good, but you would like to get better. Yeah, I'm pretty, or maybe it's I'm already serious about this and I'd like to have it on the world stage. Maybe you want to enter film competitions, or maybe you want to do it professionally. In my case, when I look at my pictures and my video, it's like I've jumped back into Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine. I relive those experiences and those feelings every time I see a picture or a film. And when I put together a film together, it's like so much better than just slides and things like that, films. First things first, I'm going to be telling you a couple of times in here is that you really need to concentrate on your diving skills. Control underwater makes everything easier and safer. Read your manual, download it, take it with you when you go on a dive trip. And yeah, read it a bunch too. Assemble your gear at home and then practice and practice. You need to be one with your camera, with your lights and your filters and your control. You need to understand what you have. You need to feel comfortable with it. Find a pool, practice underwater. And then don't be that guy that shows up and assembles your camera for the first time on a trip. That's kind of stupid, but I've seen it happen, and I've helped some of those people in the past. It's not a lot of fun. Remember one thing, and this is something that is very important to me: YouTube is your savior, you shall not want. You will get confused, and you're going to need more information. All you need to do basically is to type in whatever you need on YouTube, and a tutorial or a dozen will show up. Look at them. Keep your camera with you and then practice. Go over, stop, repeat until you understand it. Practice until you understand what is being said on the YouTube channel. And it's very important, you need to review your work and understand the good, the bad, and the ugly that you just created. You can do this as soon as you can do it underwater. A lot of times, what's on the back of your camera is going to be very important. You shoot something, you look at it and say, well, that didn't work. And so you say, why didn't it? And you make a few changes and something happens. And then you learn from the back of your camera. When you get back, review your films immediately if you can, or download it to your PC. And that night, go through it and look at it. It's all very important because learning on the fly is probably the most efficient thing. And talk to your friends, get them over, ask them, this is here, I did something, what happened? How can I make it better? Equipment choices you might need. I've talked about cameras, action cameras like the GoPro up here in the top left over here, or the action camera, the DJI over here, the mid-range point and shoots like the Olympus over here, or the, well, this is actually two Olympuses. And then lights like the Sea Life light or the Kraken light up here. We're talking about tripods and bases are for really essential to be doing good work underwater. And there are many options here. You can see some of them. And red filters and diopters. All of those things are important for doing different types of underwater video from macro to wide angle, getting the color right, getting stable video footage. So every camera is different. Controls and capabilities change even from one model to the next. Try to understand what you want to accomplish first. You're going to be going out there and you're going to be diving, and you're going to have some ideas of what you're going to be wanting to get in your camera and what you're going to want to do with it. If you understand that ahead of time, you can do a little bit of planning. The next thing would be, well, how much do you want to spend? I mean, you can go very cheap, or you can spend tens of thousands of dollars very easily getting gear. So once you get it in mind what you want, you're going to buy in a system. If you're going to be buying a system, do your research, talk to people and talk to the experts. I have been with the backscatter people a lot, but Light and Motion and a lot of people and Icolite all deserve your time, and they'll be more than happy to give you advice on what equipment and how to put it together and how to use it. Use those experts. Okay, the high-end SLR camera systems, you have basically 4 different types that I've highlighted here. Up here in the big kahunas like the Nikon D850, which are full frame mirrored, are very heavy, they're very capable, they're really expensive, but they do a superb job. But they don't do it any better than some of the lesser cameras. The Sony Alpha 7 II here is a full frame mirrorless camera. It has the same basic capabilities as your full frame mirror, but it's smaller because it doesn't have to contend with a mirror. The Canon R7 is a crop sensor, which means that it has a smaller sensor and all of your lenses are going to be more telephoto. The Olympus EM1 Mark II is what I have. Here's a Mark III. It is what's called a 4:3 mirrorless camera. And the magnification factors, if you look over here, your full frame cameras are like 1x. If you get into the crop sensors like the Canon R7 down here, your crop sensor is 1.5. That means that a 60 millimeter lens is going to act like a 90 millimeter. And in a mirrorless system, it's a 2x. I have a 60 millimeter macro lens that I use on my Canon, my Olympus, and it acts like a 120, and it's a bear to use. You get into the mid-range cameras, you get into the Olympus TG4 and TG6, and I have just seen so much good work out of this camera system. You have the Sea Life Micro 3.0 down here. And then you also have the Canon G7X, one of my Australian friends over in Fiji that I met was doing some excellent work with this one over here, and the Lumix L10. But there are a wide range of varieties of selections. The features vary considerably. They're typically affordable. Their sensors are a lot smaller, and that makes them noisier as far as color noise is concerned. Some are water resistant, like the Olympus TG6, maybe down to about 30, 40 feet, but you're still going to want to put a housing around them especially if you're going to go down 60, 80, 90 feet. The Sea Life is good as it is because it's built for underwater work. And that would be, most of these are going to require underwater housings. Most of these, like the G7X, the TG6, the LX10, and others, have zoom lenses. The Sea Life is a fixed wide angle lens. Some of them feature super micro shooting. In other words, you're looking at not just macro 1-to-1, you're looking at even tinier things. So the capabilities, you're getting a lot of value for your buck on the compact cameras, but they have some drawbacks compared to the higher end systems. But all of them provide high value, and some are better for underwater than others. And I would really recommend that everybody do your research before you buy. Ask people, ask the experts. The action cameras, the GoPro series is a real, I love the GoPro series, but there are other ones like the DJI cameras. GoPro has been around a long time. Every model seems to come out with improvements. And I've had a Hero 4, a 6, a 9, and 11. So that tells you something about what I think about them. But people like Craig and Betsy, they have the DJI Action Modular. I think you like them, right? Have a little bit. They are good for drones, but they have good technology. So those are what you can do with those. There are others. You can get into super inexpensive, like the Wolfang GA400 or the Akaso Brave 7. They're going to be below $150. And then the Sea Life RM4K is their first action camera. They got a bit of ways to go, but it's got some really good things going for it. You have access to all of the controls on it. It has some built-in red filter functions that you can access without putting a filter in front of it. So they're going in the right direction. They probably just need a few more models to do it. Is this the wave of the future? It may be. I've seen a Sea Life has come out with this housing right here, and it's good for your iPhones and your Android phones. They've done a very good job from what I can tell. It has access to the controls and settings underwater. It can be fitted with a red filter. Actually, diopters, I'm not sure about that. You can actually change the focal length underwater like you can with your iPhones directly. But it also comes with a vacuum lock system over here, right here, that allows you to put it under vacuum so it protects your investment. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more people using this over the years. Lights, okay, what do I dive with? Well, this is what I dive with. And I've actually had more than this. I started off with this little Sola 15, and it was like almost $500 when I bought it. It gave me 500 lumens of light, and it had a red light feature. And then later I moved up to an Light Vega, to a dual system, and I sold that to some of my friends, and they used it for a while. But I moved up to a 3800 lumen system, the Sola 3800s. And I've used those, and I think they're great. They're a little bit underpowered for when you want to do wide angle, but they do great. I also have a friend up in Dallas that sells big blues, so I have a bunch of those as well. The little 4200 is very super convenient. It has these small batteries here. You can buy extra batteries and have them charged up for between dives. So when you get in, you just change your battery and keep going. The Big Blue 15,000 lumens, the big kahunas here, are awesome. They're not cheap. They're about $1,200 each, and the battery pack itself comes in at $250 each, and I have 4 of them. So that's $1,000 worth of batteries itself. But the nice thing about these is that they can be controlled remotely. I just have a little thumb switch over near my handle, and anytime I want to turn it on or turn it off or change the settings, I can without having to reach up and individually do one. And I would really recommend, if you're thinking seriously about lighting underwater, going with something like this. So affordable lights, and not necessarily going to tell you to go out and buy these things, but they are available. The Sea Life Sea Dragon is actually a very competent camera or light. It's going to give you about 2,500 lumens. It's not necessarily cheap, but it's reliable and it's backed up by a good company. This Trustfire DF50 I found online is $399 for 6,500 lumens. Seems pretty good. But if you talk about something, they claim 13,000 lumens for this Lenton for 218. Okay, well, that's a lot of lumens for not very much money. But then you look at here, you get 5,000 lumens for $36. And later on, you're going to meet Scott, and he is somebody that has actually used these for diving, and he says they're not bad, but you have to worry about reliability with them. And the quality of the light is not going to quite be as good as it is with the others. So the lesson to be learned here is that the buyer beware. You know, you're talking about getting in cheap. If you lose them or if they flood or something like that, you're not out a bunch of money. And then you can think about what you want next. High-end lights, yeah, you can spend a lot of money on these. Kraken and Keldan and Sola seem to be I would say the manufacturers that are thought best of, especially the Kraken and the Keldan. Backscatter has a very interesting one here that can do macro. In other words, a narrow beam or a wider beam. It's not as expensive and it's not as many lumens, and you have a filter system as well. The Sola 15,000 is kind of the grandson of the old 400 that I bought, the 500. The Kraken has a very good following. It's about like the Big Blue as far as its capabilities. Some people like it better. I think they're fairly comparable. Keldan is kind of like the Rolls Royce of the underwater camera lighting, and you can spend up to $3,000 to $4,000 on these big nuclear reactors you take down with you. Okay, a little bit about talking about tripods and things. I call this the GoPro couch potato system. We were over in the Bahamas, and their professional videographer was using just this. She did great work with it. It's just got the flip filter and it's got a macro lens on it. But if you're going to be diving with crocodiles, you might want to think about something like this. Right, Jim? Okay. And then one step above couch potato is something I think is really, really cool. These little, you can buy them at Walmart or on Amazon, $15 tripod, put your GoPro in a housing and get a flip filter. That's all you really need. Cheap and capable. This is my favorite. This is the one that I have used for years, and I've got a lot of good stuff with it. It's my personal favorite. It's cheap, it's easy, it's ugly, but it works. And I had to build it myself. These little modular goofball arms, I call them right here, the plastic ball and socket arms. You can get them from Modular Hose, and you can assemble them any way you want to, as long as you want to. I used them for my tripod legs, and I also used them as my arms and my handles. But I also have it set up with the GoPro with two red filters right here. Here's a cheap tripod. It might be okay. It's got a threaded adapter. I've never used it, but it is out there. Heavier duty, I think Betsy has got this Joby tripod and has used it. It will support heavier gear. Now, if you want to spend a lot of money and get a very high end, you can get the XIT base plate for $200, and you can get for $175 a leg, you can get these twist clamp legs, and the full system will cost you $725. And that, Betsy, I know you use it, something like it, and you've not anymore? Too heavy. Okay, well, I hear it's for sale. This is the base plate that I used for a couple of years. I moved over to a different base plate because I like the arrangement of the legs. But this is all I use. I take the ultralight arms, 8-inch, and that's my rig. I have the Olympus housing, the Zen ultralight tripod. And you see over here, this is the remote for my lights right over here. Very easy to get to. I also show this Zen ultralight, ultra-wide wet lens that I haven't used yet, but I plan to. Or you can go to Backscatter. You can buy this for a house Olympus system like this. It comes with everything you need. This tray is 128 on sale. Everything else costs more. But it's a very impressive system for a compact camera setup. And flip filters and diopters. This is all things that I own. The flip filters, here's just for the single, or you can have it for the double. I've got it set here with the 10x macro and a 15x macro lens. But you can also have these plastic filters, or you can have the 55mm threaded red filters. I prefer the threaded red filters that come, because I've broken a couple of these red flip filters before. They break right here. So if you're going to use the red flip, the plastic ones, just use them carefully. I've also bought a set of 455mm Tiffin macro diopters for $15, and they work great. So we're going to talk now section 1, good color. Well, what do you want? Do you want death by cyan, which we all see when you take pictures without doing color balancing or using red filters? Or you can have good lighting and you can have all the colors showing up. So what it is about light, as you go deeper, especially in the seawater, after about 15 to 20 feet, you're starting to lose your reds and your yellows. You get down to around 30 feet, you've lost more. At 60 feet, everything looks really bluish green. You get down to diving limits at 130, everything is this off cyan green, and you don't have hardly any reds and yellows coming down at that point in time. I'm not going to be talking about working in freshwater. It's a whole different subject, and not too many people do it. Well, I say that, but it's not true. So light at depth. At the surface, sunlight has a CRI, or a color rendering index, of 100. And that's what we all want to emulate. Video lights, good ones, can approach 100 CRI, but they'll never get there because the light emitting diodes just don't put out sunlight according to the spectrum that we're normally experiencing. Better lights cost more money. The light color costs more money. As we descend, as I said, we're losing the reds and the yellows. They bleach out first. After a while, all you see is blues and greens. And if you go deeper, even you're starting to lose some, even the purples. So sunlight is what we all know. The color temperature for that is 5,500 Kelvin. Our eyes understand this. Our brain understands it. And our brain will make some compensation, but that doesn't mean the camera will. The camera is going to need some help. The sensor is going to see exactly what hits the sensor. If it's bluish green, that's what you're going to get. The goal is to match sunlight conditions on the sensor when you get there. Auto white balancing in camera analyzes an image and tries to emulate things at sunlight conditions. And it does so by adjusting the red and the green and the blue channels. When you're topside, it does a very good job of doing this because the programming is built for topside out in the wilderness or wherever you are. Underwater, it just doesn't work very well. You can, for maybe 15 feet to the surface, auto white balance works just great, but underwater, not so good. Deeper, the camera is going to need a lot of help. You can either reprogram the sensor using custom white balancing, or you can filter it using red and magic filters. Some people call them spectrum filters. And what that's doing is it's filtering out the excess blues and the greens. Or my favorite, buy yourself some nuclear reactors and take them down with you. external lights, or some combination. So how do you combat color loss? One is to stay shallow, or use video lights. You can shoot through magic red filter sets. Depending on whether you're shallow or deeper, you're going to want one or another one. They're built for shallow and deep. Or you can do your cameras, you can use your cameras built in underwater color filter modes. Some of the cameras like the Sea Life and others have these filters already built into them. They're kind of like a custom white balance that you don't have to set up underwater yourself. You just hit a button and you choose it. And sometimes it does good. And sometimes if the lighting conditions are different, you're not going to be particularly happy with it. But it's available and it's there for things that have it. Or you can do your own custom white balancing underwater, or you can save them ahead of time, as many 3 to 5 different custom settings for different depths. You can do it one for 15 feet and down to 30 feet and 60 feet and maybe 90 feet. And as you descend, you can choose a different white balance setting, custom white balance setting, depending on how deep you are. Or you can do it on the fly. Or you can do some combination or the above. Or my favorite, you can just expect a miracle. You can fix a lot of this in editing, but not in this workshop. Generalizations about the 4 zones. Zone 1, I call this from 10 to 15 feet to the surface. You want to go with natural lighting at this point. Use auto white balance, it'll work just great. Unless you get into really dark, stormy times, and then you're probably going to want to use a red filter there even, because everything's going to be blue. But video lights will work there as well. 15 feet to 30 feet, use the shallow water or what they call the dive filter, the red filter there. You can use lights or you can use custom white balancing, all work good. From 30 to 60 feet, when you start getting bluer, you can use the deep red water filter, or you can use lights or custom white balance. And yes, question. Okay, never mind. Or when you get really deep from 60 to 130 feet, really lights are your best choice. Red filters, what are they and why do you want to use them? More correctly, they should be called spectrum filters because they aren't just red, they adjust for the light loss at different levels. Here's what the flip filters, which are the most popular ones out there, and they fit your GoPros. They come in different packages, single packages, 2 filter sets, ProVac packages. You can get a bunch of different diopters. You can get a dye filter, a deep filter, a green water, or you can even do a filter for doing fluorescence filtration. And the 55 millimeter filter holder is my favorite. That's what it looks like. This one has the dye filter and the macro lens, the 15X on it. So, can't see it, but when and when not to use red filters. You don't want to use a red filter when you're near the surface. It's just going to be too yellow. You don't want to use it when you're using video lights because everything is going to be too yellow. You don't want to use them when you've already set your camera for custom white balance. You do want to use them when you're using natural or ambient light. That's the main source of illumination. And you want to use them for below 15 feet, 10 to 15 feet. So this is what happens when you use a red filter above about 10 feet deep. It just doesn't work. Let it run here. If you're shallow and you're using a red filter, this is what you'll get. And yes, this can be corrected in editing, but that's another workshop. In the shallows and in good sunlight, you can get excellent color without a red filter. Below 15 feet or so, with no lights, you really do need a red filter to get the colors correct. Here, I was using a red filter and for some reason, I decided to turn on my lights. I guess it's interesting. Okay, and here is a another lesson in lights and filters. This is a good example of why red filters and lights don't mix very well. Turning the video lights off demonstrates how well that the red filters can perform. My favorite is using video lights and no red filter. Okay, it's a mixed light problem. When you're at depth, your ambient light is bluish. Your lights that you're going to use are like sunlight, and you're having to balance the two. Everything beyond about 3 to 4 feet is going to be bluish if you don't do color balancing or use a red filter. Everything between 3 feet and your camera is going to have the proper color balance because you're using lights. So it's really good to balance the two. Video lights do a good job out to about 3 to 4 feet, as long as they're strong enough. Red filters can correct for ambient light to a large extent, and video lights aren't really needed. But, and there's two very big buts here. The deeper you go, the worse the trade-offs when using red filters, and we'll talk about that. Final thing is that conditions like clouds or shooting late in the dawn or dusk complicates things as far as the light quality is concerned. And all of the things need to be factored in when you're working. So, but number one, red filters don't add warmth. What they do is they subtract cool, if that's a word. So what's happening is that the blues and green light that are down below are your main source of illumination, and they have to be removed to be able to balance the reds and the blues. This forces your cameras to use higher ISO settings to achieve a proper exposure. The deeper you go, the worse it becomes. Higher ISO values increase color noise. For action cameras, maybe 400 to 800 ISO is your maximum before color noise starts to become a real problem. At 1200 and above, it really becomes annoying. I don't like that. Can you still see me? Okay, good. For mid-range cameras with larger and perhaps better sensors, you should be able to get maybe 1200 before it becomes objectionable. For high-end cameras, which have large, high-quality sensors and really fat pixels, ISO values can be much higher before you start hitting the color noise ceiling. I think that maybe you can go as high as 12,500, which means you're able to shoot almost in dark and still not see objectionable conditions. Here is an example taken in Analau when we were on a blackwater dive. You'll see it's a lot easier to understand high ISO noise with an example. Here we were on a blackwater dive over in Analau. They were putting out the dive lights on the downlight that we would swim around. Knowing that we wouldn't have very much light, I put my ISO on 3200 on my GoPro and started shooting. I got it more or less properly exposed, but the noise was just really, really bad. I wanted to use this clip, so when I got home, I went into DaVinci and used its noise reduction algorithm. The results are better, but, well, not really great. Sometimes a sow's ear is just that, a sow's ear, and not a silk purse. So, but number two, and this is something that very few people understand, shooting through red filters and diopters and flat ports can generally generate a rainbow fringing, especially in the corners and the left and right of your images. And that's because light is hitting those flat surfaces at an angle. This effect is called chromatic aberration. And it's basically what prisms do to light. It breaks it apart into the reds and the greens and the blues, and you get this color fringing. High quality optics in your higher end cameras with lights are programmed or basically designed to fight chromatic aberration, but it's still going to be there, especially if you're behind a flat port. Shooting at smaller apertures minimizes chromatic aberration, and shooting behind a dome port almost completely eliminates it because the light is not hitting so much at an angle. So here's an example of chromatic aberration. I've blown this up and zoomed it in.
Chromatic aberration is a pet peeve of mine. You can make it go away to a certain extent, but it's going to be there regardless. Because of how light interacts with uncorrected filters and housing windows, you will see color fringing, especially in the corners and in high contrast areas. Ways to minimize this are to not use super wide angle settings on your GoPro or use lights and no red filters. Higher end cameras with quality optics aren't immune to chromatic aberration, but the problems are much less. Some correction during editing is possible.
Okay, we're going to be talking now about custom white balancing, which is reprogramming the sensor. You can do this mostly with high-end cameras. I think some of the mid-range cameras are capable of doing it as well. So what is underwater white balancing? When you are below 10 to 15 feet, you're going to need to do something like that to train your camera's sensor to adjust for the color corrections that it needs to do. So you select the color custom white balance in the menu, and then you photograph a white or a gray card or even a gray glove. And then in the menu, accept that one for your color white balance setting. And it will then boost the warm colors and you can start taking your video. And then if you change depth, you want to repeat steps 1 through 3 because things are going to change. Or you can actually, I think I mentioned this before, a lot of these cameras, like my camera, can save 3 different custom white balance settings. If I get my act together on the first dive, I'll go down to about 15 or 20 feet and I'll set my first custom white balance and I'll save it. Then I go down about 40 feet and I take a second setting and I save that one. Then I get to around 60 to 70 feet for the deeper water and I save a third one. Now, all 3 of those are available on subsequent dives. If I get down to 30, 40 feet, I know I want to go to the middle one. If I get down to around 60 to 70 feet, I go to my final custom white balance. Some cameras will allow you to do 5, maybe even more custom white balance. So here is kind of a half-assed way to demonstrate this.
This is an awkward attempt at trying to show you how custom white balance works. The first step is to select the custom white balance setting in the menu. It then prompts me to hit the info button and take a picture, which I then approve to use to set the new white balance. This photo was taken after custom white balance was established. Then backing off with the red light still on, here's what the entire scene looked like. With practice, the whole process only takes a few seconds.
Okay, so custom white balancing for mid-range and compact cameras. Some may offer custom white balancing, but I'm not an expert in this point. Some of them, like the Sea Life and a few others, will offer multiple underwater white balance modes that you can select by just hitting a button. You select one of those and you start shooting. The ones that are on, like I have an underwater setting, white balance setting in my Olympus, but it's only good down to maybe about 15 feet. And it's because those cameras aren't built for divers. So here's just some examples of one of my paintings, or friend's paintings, shot at incandescent light under blue light, and then I had my white balance setting right here, and then after I had accepted it. And the same thing for red. You can see that before and after, they're not exactly the same, but pretty good. Here is an example. that I did over in Fiji.
In this clip, I was about 80 feet deep, and of course my batteries were dead on my video lights, so I custom white balanced, and this is what I got. It's not too bad. Because the clip was already custom white balanced, bringing out the colors in editing was a snap. Later, as we got closer to the surface, I took some more video, and of course I had forgotten to take off my custom white balance. You can see how red things are. But it can be fixed. After I saw how bad the last clip looked, I went ahead and did another custom white balance, and this is the result.
Okay, we are roughly 50% of the way into my program here. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. You can get up and stretch around. I have a 5-minute film here that I took over in Fiji that I'll just let run. You can see there's some examples of what, especially for wide angle, about 30%, 35% of this was done using my GoPro 9, and I was using filters and I was using lights, depending on what it was. The rest was done with my Olympus E-M1 Mark II in Nauticam housing. Okay, take a break. No. Oh, I need to turn off the lights in here. I should have turned the lights off a long time ago. Okay, sorry. Really? Justin and I have worked a lot with how we did You know Jessica, so contact him and let him ask him. Yeah, really need to. Editing VHS was a bear. It was tough. Yeah.
With Dennis.
Because a lot of this is old stuff. We talked to you about all of it at one time or the other.
I was wondering when you were going to use this in more advanced models.
A little bit later, yeah. Yes. What about that? Yeah, you for a GoPro, you need the highest, fastest you can get, because if you're going to be shooting 4K or 5K, yeah, you understand. Yeah, you really need to be careful. Even cards now, I think, that have even faster, better performance. And I've been getting the best ones that I can because I know that my GoPro 5, 9, 11 is going to need it, especially if I start shooting 5.3K. Yeah. Well, it is. Tried to give Huff a couple of. Before you got, I talked about the film festival, didn't I? Or were you here when I was talking about it? Yeah, I came in afterwards.
Was HD6. I was saying I went to was incredibly low. You had people coming in
Exactly, exactly.
Water is sent. You got two instructors down, they had a guy that was training.
Yeah.
And then you had one, and they had one around to show them how to put it. I think 30 or 40% of the better photos came out with DV6.
There's nothing wrong with that camera. It doesn't have the ultimate capabilities, but I am impressed.
Oh yeah.
I really am. Just like I'm impressed with the GoPro. Every time I turn around, the GoPro getting better, especially in stabilization modes. I'm not as crazy about the color, but that's what editing is all about.
Any issues like the GoPro heating underwater?
I've never had it. It's basically you're getting so much heat transfer from outside that housing around it, which is very close, is pretty cold. You know, I've never had it. I've had it stop on me, but I think it's because my card, the bit rate is fast for my card. Then it catches up and I can start it again. I've never drowned one.
Yeah, well, you told me I had mine, he looked at his, he's like, look, it's already in the housing, and I had to cut the dive. Always leave them unlatched, because if you keep them latched, they will either fail at the seam or they will fail.
What happened with that one that I loaned you is it actually had a crack in the housing. You know, when you're cranking it down,
that was
there,
Sandy.
you're putting
That wasn't me thinking.
a lot of
I said
stress
that
on
was Sandy
plastic,
holding on.
and it just cracked just enough to let water in. It didn't destroy the camera.
Yeah, we got lucky. My GoPro went out. I haven't put it in yet because it came in a couple weeks ago. I've just been so busy with other stuff.
I just keep it right on top of my camera because when I'm shooting macro and a whale shark comes
That's what
by,
I'm gonna do. I need to get. Yeah, I need to get the. But when you're storing it, store it unlatched. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's. Yeah.
all right, let's get settled, please. Okay, are we all back? One missing? Well, we'll get started. He'll be back. His bladder can't be that full.
Yeah, that's me. Sure.
Hi there, out there in Zoom land, how's it coming out? Somebody that's on Zoom, tell me how.
Going great. Everything looks perfect.
Okay, I always worry about Zoom because Zoom and PowerPoint don't play well together, especially when it's video. I dumbed down my video clips and everything like that to 24 frames a second and medium quality. Otherwise, the bit rate just screws things up really bad and it starts skipping and stalling. So I guess I did okay. All right. So section 2 is about stabilization, and we're going to get started now.
In section 2, we talk about stability and how to achieve it. A lot of what I will be talking about is equipment related, but a lot of it is also personal diving habits.
Okay, we talk about diver control, and it's very important when it comes to handling your camera as to how you work underwater and the results you're going to get. If you have good buoyancy, and if you can stay calm, and if you want to back off a little bit so that things aren't right in your face all the time. Also, don't chase your subject as much because it's not going to work well. If you're going to pan, you can pan with the action, but do it slowly and don't do a lot of jerky actions. Otherwise, you're just going to make your audience sick. Tripods are essential, I think.
778.
You need, I'm sorry, what? Please mute your,
Thank you.
we need you to mute, please. Okay, another thing is to buy, you can buy better equipment. Buy a camera or a lens that provides stabilization. Sorry. My wingman screwed us up here. Can you hear me out there?
Yep, hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. I'm going to go on now. Okay, use a tripod, get better equipment, buy a camera that has stabilization modes built in, use a wider lens, or you can correct it during editing. Generally speaking, try not to chase your subjects.
My experience trying to video actively moving subjects has usually been a disaster. It's better to back off or zoom wider and give them room to move around inside the larger frame. Sometimes they'll move out of the frame and then after a while they'll come back. Later, during editing, you can zoom in or even pan around to follow the action.
If you have things that are moving, sometimes it's okay to pan with the motion.
I'm not saying not to pan with the motion, but be careful and choose wisely. In some cases, you can just simply follow the action and everything turns out nicely. The key is to do it smoothly and no jerky motion.
Okay, here I was early on with the GoPro 4, no stabilization, a lot of bad stuff going on here.
I've been doing this for quite a while now. It's not difficult for me to find some bad examples. You really don't want to do this to your friends. Lesson 2, with a GoPro, don't get too close.
So what should I have done?
This is how it should be done. After spotting these morays, the first thing I did was decide where to put my camera. Then I adjusted my tripod so that my camera was on a level with the two morays, and then I turned on my video lights. At that point, it would just turn on the camera and let it run. The slow zooming effect was done during editing.
So we'll talk about tripod etiquette, and my point here is that don't use your tripods as weapons of mass destruction. I've seen it happen, and I try to not do it myself.
Here, my friend Justin is demonstrating how best to use a tripod, well, in this case, his tripod base. He's doing it the right way. He's not stirring up any of the muck, and he's not damaging anything, and when he's done, he just sort of rises off and doesn't disturb anything. People really need to avoid stirring up the muck and damaging anything with their tripods. If you found something good, call your friends over. Let them have a chance.
Okay, let's talk about tripod uses and tips.
Tripods are best used for macro work where things aren't moving much. But if the scene is right, use for wider scenes. Backing off some will help keep things in the shot. Zoom later during editing if you need to. Get low, level, or below your subject if possible. I'll ooch my tripod at times if the subject is moving out of the frame. Or I'll just reposition it and keep filming. I also like to try different angles and heights.
Okay, we're going to be talking about stabilization modes. There is mechanical image stabilization, and there's electronic image stabilization. With mechanical, it's 5-axis sensor shift. what's happening here is that it's available on some point and shoot and high-end cameras. And it works very, very well, and we'll get into that. Two-axis lens shift. Some cameras have lenses that have stabilization elements built into it that allow it to follow the action and remove it. But I found that with my Canon stabilization lenses, that it's better for very like vibration and things like that, killing vibration, as opposed to doing big shifts that are necessary for underwater work. Electronic image stabilization works very differently, but the effects are very much the same. These are available on many of your action cameras and your point and shoots, and some, but not all of your high-end cameras. So here's an example of two GoPros.
A picture, or in this case, a video, is really worth 1,000 words. For this demonstration, I took my GoPro 9 and my GoPro 11 and put them on the same tray, and I just started filming. For the GoPro 9, I took stabilization completely off. For the GoPro 11, I set it on hypersmooth with horizon following. Here, I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, and I'm panning pretty fast at times. You can see the jitter in the film that this causes. Waves, surge, or even taking a breath will affect what happens with the camera. If you're going to pan, do it slowly, or do it quickly and stop. It's really impressive just how well their hypersmooth stabilization feature works. Electronic stabilization is probably one of the most effective ways to control camera shake.
Okay, we're going to talk about the GoPro 11 because it's a good example here. The GoPro 11 has got this massive sensor. It provides 5,120 by 3850 in the 5.K 4.3 ratio, or you get 5.3K, which takes it to 5,312 horizontally. I've marked the four red from 1080p down here to 2.7K, 4K, and 5.3K to give you an idea of the different sizes that these different settings provide. The 4.K is something that is popular nowadays. Shooting 4K at 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second works great. Most outputs are at 1080p. This is your normal television screen size. So you can see that you're going to be outputting it at this size right here, but your sensor can take in all of this range here. So when you're doing stabilization, some of this real estate that's available here, like for instance, if I'm shooting 4K in a 5.3K ratio, I have a lot of room for this frame to move around electronically to stabilize it. So the 8.8 to 7 full sensor is amazing itself. Okay, you don't use this underwater too much because most people will be using the 16:9 TV type of ratio right here for TV and YouTube and films and things like that. But this one right here, you can actually take your GoPro and turn it in a circle upside down. If you have horizon following on, it still locks onto the horizon. It's pretty amazing. This particular 4:3 ratio is good for things like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, a lot of the social media programs or platforms, I should say. Or now cell phones. The 9:16 format can be extracted from the 8:7 without any image loss of image quality. So the 11, and I'm a big fan of the GoPro. It's got amazing functionality. It's affordable. It's easy to use. The image quality is really excellent for the money you're putting out. Typically, you can get these for less than $400. As I said before, the 8.7 5K is massive. With hypersmooth on, turn it in circles. to demonstrate what's going on in here with the electronic sensor stabilization, what happens is that the programming inside has an artificial intelligence that when you turn it on and you're stabilizing it, it will select certain points inside that image to lock onto. And then the smaller section here, like 4K, if I'm shooting in 4.K and I have a 5.3K sensor, it allows this to move around, to rotate, or to go up or down, or even to pitch and yaw. So these are the 5 different settings you have: X, Y, rotation, pitch, and yaw. Right now, I have a 5-minute video by my friend and an awesome talent, Scott Bauer. He's currently out on the fling today, shooting video and stuff like that. So he couldn't be here, but he let me use his video. He's really very, very competent at this.
Today I'm going to show you what I feel like should be the go-to settings when you're shooting underwater with your GoPro Hero 11. We're going to go through some test footage, and I also wanted to share with you a really cool hack that I feel like really helps when you're taking these things underwater. But I don't want to waste too much more of your time talking, so let's jump right into it. Before we get started, you're going to want to make sure that your controls are set on Pro. To do this, you simply swipe down from the top of the screen, swipe to the right, drill into the controls menu, and you'll see the 2 options, Easy and Pro. You want to make sure that it's set on Pro, and now we're ready to get started. Now, a lot of you might want to be shooting in 5.3K at 60 frames a second, which is absolutely fine. Shooting high res like that gives you a lot of freedom to punch in on the image without losing resolution. However, I'm going to be shooting at 4K 60, that way it doesn't eat up so much space on my SD card or use up so much of my battery. Now, as far as lens is concerned, I find wide to be the most useful. It's wide enough to convey the setting that you're in, but doesn't have a whole lot of distortion, which is pretty important when people happen to be in frame. Now, the Hero 11 has a new Hyper Smooth feature called Auto Boost, which is only going to crop in to stabilize if there's any sort of shake or movement in the camera, so we're going to go ahead and set it on that. Now, the rest of the features on this page I pretty much keep turned off, and that's going to include schedule capture, duration, hindsight, and timer. So now we're going to move on down to Pro Tune, which brings us to 10-bit color. If you're not doing any sort of specialized color grading in post, especially color grading that involves pushing individual colors, I would leave this feature off and set your bitrate to standard. Doing so will not only preserve your battery, but it'll also save space on your SD card. However, if you are doing this sort of color grading in post, I hear the difference is huge, so I'm going to leave these settings on. And because I don't use ND filters or anything like that, I'm going to set the shutter speed to auto. Now, as far as EV comp is concerned, I set mine to -1 because there's something about GoPro's algorithm that causes the image to be overexposed in a lot of cases. A lot of people like -0.5. However, on a bright and sunny day, I feel like that's still not enough, so I'm going to set mine to -1. I'm going to keep my white balance at auto, and the minimum ISO is always going to be set to 100. Now I want to talk about max ISO because this clip was shot in a pretty dark and murky lake, and for some of us, those are going to be pretty normal conditions, and in that case, I would recommend to set your max ISO to 800. It's just going to be too dark otherwise. However, if you're diving in clear water, I would lower that to 400. I keep the sharpness on low because I could go back in post and add the sharpness as needed. Or if you're not doing a whole lot of editing, I would recommend just to keep it on medium. Now, you might have noticed that there's some new color profiles here on the Hero 11. There used to be just GoPro color and flat. Now it's flat, natural, and vibrant. And vibrant seems to be more equivalent to what GoPro color was on the older models, and it does seem a little oversaturated, and when shooting underwater, it seems that there's always a green tint on the image. If you like, you can try shooting them flat to see how well you can bring the color back in post. However, I'm just going to leave mine in natural. If you want to do something specific with the audio file, keep it on high, otherwise I would keep it on medium and turn the wind compensation off. And as you can see, my shortcuts are pretty standard, it's just what comes stock as you get the GoPro. Now that we went through the settings, let's talk about that useful hack that I mentioned in the intro. Let's say that you're set up for 4K 60, and on your dive you come across something that you feel would be inspiring to shoot with slow motion. So of course you're going to want to switch to the ultra slow motion mode. But remember, your GoPro's inside the housing and you don't have access to the touchscreen. So the solution here is simple. You simply press the side button and almost immediately afterwards the top button. This is going to open up a menu that shows all of your different profiles, allowing you to cycle through them by pressing the side button. Once you decide which profile you want to switch to, you can select it by pressing the top button. So now that we've covered all of this, let's take a look at some test footage. So here we just covered what I feel like are the best settings for your GoPro Hero 11 while you're shooting underwater, and I also went through how you can change through different profiles on one single dive without having to take your GoPro out of the underwater housing. And I want to mix it up even more by showing you exactly what you can do to shoot macro video with your GoPro. That way you have that perspective to add into your sequence as well, and that's going to be on the next video, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that content. I can't wait to see you on the next dive. Thanks for watching.
Scott's really a very talented underwater diver. He's starting to hit his stride right now. I think we're going to see a lot of him in the future. This is a sort of an interesting example of what is actually happening inside with electronic stabilization, or actually 5-axis stabilization in general. So right here is we have a shot that was done without as shot, handheld, and you can see it's moving around a bit, right? And I'm actually, this little Coleman shrimp moves up into the upper right-hand corner towards the end of this. If I use maximum stabilization in DaVinci and I do a comparison between, you can see the difference here. It helps, but it doesn't really lock completely in on things. But not bad. It does a pretty good job. This is where it gets even more confusing, or I should say more instructive. You can't see the top up here, but basically what it does is that I'm using DaVinci Resolve to demonstrate what the sensor is or the electronic stabilization is actually doing. It's got this larger frame out here, and it is locking in on this little Coleman shrimp here, and it is not allowing it to move at all. I'm locked in on this guy right here. Now watch what the frame does when I start to activate it. This is what the camera is doing right now. It's keeping this little shrimp, 2 shrimps, exactly in the center. But in order to do it, it's using up some, or in this case, more than all of the frame. So you do it one more time. You see it's on the bottom, and now it's creeping in as I move closer and closer. That's what's happening with 5-axis stabilization. It's doing everything: X, Y, rotation, pitch, and yaw. Now, if I actually zoom it in so that it's locked and it can't move, but I want to make sure that everything is on screen, this is what it looks like. You see this bottom one right here? How much closer I have to be? I've used up only a small portion of this frame to be able to get it into one area. I mean, it still looks good if that's what you want. So that's what stabilization is doing electronically. Your mechanical stabilization is doing it a different way. Okay, let's see if I can get down to the next one.
Once again, on
I have to say, GoPro 11 and I'm shooting 2.7K. I have a microscope. So I will say that to actually move around inside that bigger frame. So it's stabilizing, and I still have plenty of resolution.
As you say, when you're shooting like in a smaller resolution, 2.7K, and you have a 4K sensor or even bigger, I mean, there's a lot of room for that image to actually move around inside the frame, rotate left, right, up and down, everything to allow it to stay stable. And it's all done electronically and with their artificial intelligence program. Now, if you're looking at the mechanical stabilization, it works differently because
Once again, I'll narrate this section because, well, it gets a little bit complex. Many more advanced cameras now offer 5-axis mechanical stabilization. Very sensitive motion sensors inside the camera sense motion in 5 axes: X, Y, rotation, pitch, and yaw. The camera's artificial intelligence instantly analyzes this information and sends signals to an array of micromagnets attached to the camera sensors to adjust its position to counteract vibration and motion. The results can be spectacular, but it's not perfect. Some cameras have both mechanical and digital stabilization capabilities which can be operated independently or in parallel. The user selects either or both based on needs and experience. Some users will elect just to use mechanical stabilization and restabilize later during editing if necessary.
Okay, well, that was section 2. Do you have any questions about stabilization at this point? Yeah, Mike. Here, just a second. Hand that to Mike.
The one you showed with the 4 screens and the DaVinci Resolve and what's happening.
Yeah.
On your camera settings, when you're taking that, did you have hyper smooth on or not?
No,
Would that make much
I
of a
wasn't. That
difference?
was actually, I was doing that not in real space. I was trying to demonstrate what was going on using DaVinci. And I think that it gives the example of what is happening with the electronic stabilization.
Okay, so you had the electronic stabilization running in the camera and DaVinci showing you what it did.
Yeah, I probably did. I'm pretty sure I had 5-axis stabilization then. I was probably moving around a lot more in that Coleman. If it hadn't have been for my camera's internal sensors, it probably would have been a lot worse. My typical mode, my Olympus EM1, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. With my Olympus, what I typically have is I use both electronic and mechanical stabilization. And then when I get it into post with DaVinci, I stabilize it again. As long as I have enough real estate to be able to get down to 1K and not start to get chewing into my resolution, I can use it. So, you know, stability is one of my big hot points. It needs to be stable as much as possible. If it isn't, I just throw it away. I don't use it. Or I slow it down so much that it doesn't matter. I know a lot of different cheats. So we're going to talk about focus right now. Yeah, but another question? Mike.
Video talking about the exposure, like, I mean, there you go. On his video, when I guess he did the, the exposure time and in the advanced settings, is that something we could set to be as small as possible if we wanted to like pull frame grabs later on? Would it matter in terms of the quality of the video?
I'm not sure I understood your question.
We'll talk about it at the end.
Okay, yeah. All right, so just another example here.
With fixed focused action cameras like GoPros, you don't have to worry about focus creep. As long as you don't get too close, everything will be in focus. When you get too close, things will fall apart, even if you're using a diopter like I was here. Selecting the correct diopter like I was here lets me get very close and everything is fully in focus.
Okay, I probably zoomed a little bit in my editing there, but you get the point. Some of you have already seen this.
If you want to shoot anything with a GoPro closer than about 20 inches, you're going to need to use diopters. Without a diopter, sharpness disappears between 15 and 20 inches. A useful tool is a pointer that is 20 inches long. A +1 diopter isn't all that useful. It gets you a little bit closer, but that's about it. A +2 diopter is a little bit more help, and you might be able to get almost out to infinity with it. A 4x diopter is useful for things that are between 6 inches and 15 inches, but don't expect to be able to use it out to infinity. A 10x diopter is getting pretty serious. It's good for things between about 4 to 7 inches, and the magnification is really quite useful. A 15x macromate is just about as close as you can get with the GoPro. It has a very narrow depth of field, and between 2 and maybe 4.5 inches is its maximum. The 15x macromate is part of the Flip Filters Pro package. So yeah, this is an example with a GoPro 6 on a tripod. I was using the +4 Tiffin diopter, and I was using my Sola 3800 lumen lights as well. I was pretty happy with this clip.
The important thing probably to remember when you're using diopters on a GoPro is that you can't really judge distance very well underwater. Everything is closer than you think it is. So if you're going down with a +10 diopter, which has got a narrow depth of field, you need to find something that gets you into that range. Maybe about a pointer of about 6 to 7 inches, and that will allow you to figure out about how far you need to be from your subject to get it into focus. For each diopter, you need to have a different length of pointer to help you gauge. So autofocus problems when you get into higher end cameras that have autofocus.
When you have a camera that uses autofocus, sometimes things like this happen. A subject that's perfectly in focus turns into crap when something moves in front of the lens. Well, it happens. Try again.
It's not like we have 36 frames in slides and things like that. So you can try it as often as you can. As long as your subject is there, keep shooting, and maybe you'll find something that is golden you can use. Here's another example that I did off in the flower gardens.
At the flower gardens, I was excited to find the sailfin blenny in a sand patch. The camera was having obvious trouble locking focus, perhaps due to the blenny's uniform dark color. I could see that it was out of focus, so I tried moving the camera to get focus lock. I got it eventually, but later in the clip I saw focus creep again. I was shooting my Olympus EM1 Mark II mirrorless camera with a 60mm lens. This is a difficult, unforgiving lens because it falls into the mid-telephoto range and has a very narrow depth of field. Later in the dive, I had better luck with a different species of blenny. I think that focus locked on nicely on this blenny because there was so much contrast.
Okay, spot focus, or I should say, we're talking about higher end cameras here that have different focus modes built into this. And I'll just let this run.
I built this little diorama to demonstrate how different autofocus modes work for most SLRs. Spot autofocus is perhaps the easiest to understand. The spot focus point can be selected anywhere inside the frame. Focus will stay locked on that point unless something moves in front of it. If the obstructing object moves away, then the focus will lock back on where it was originally. Continuous autofocus with tracking mode would seem to be perfect for many situations. Once focus lock is achieved on an object inside the frame, it should follow it around as it moves. This works pretty well, but it's not perfect. Some cameras are better than others when it comes to tracking things moving around in the frame. In this example, autofocus can occur anywhere inside the frame. In this example, only 1/3 of the sensor is used for autofocused area. If the object in focus moves outside this focus area, then focus lock will be lost and it will be reestablished on something behind it.
Okay, that kind of established it. I wish I could get rid of that. Hold on, just a second. Just so everybody can hear him.
Gotta take the bug.
So when you're shooting with your Olympus, which of those focus modes do you primarily use?
Shooting Olympus. I usually use the tracking and hope that everything works well. What do you use, Craig, Betsy?
But with your camera, yeah, the same, Dennis.
Yeah. There's also a continuous focusing mode, which works okay. I'm not really settled on what is the best mode for my camera. I think that some of the newer cameras probably do tracking better than mine does. It all comes down to the artificial intelligence built into the algorithm in the camera. If it's really, really good, it's probably going to be fast and reestablish quickly. But as you can see with mine, even with the tracking mode on, it was doing a pretty good job as long as my little flag was moving around slowly. But when I moved a little bit too fast, it lost lock for a little bit and then it reestablished quickly. So
another trick I've started using on that, just to give one other way, because it's hard with the macro, right? It jumps around, and there's a way to get back button focusing.
Yeah.
So, and there's also a setting that says still use autofocus, but just once. So if you can get the macro guy set up and hit it once, and if it's in focus, then you can start video and it won't change the focus. And God help you if he moves. So
yeah.
I
really think that yeah, go ahead.
I'll throw another tip in. And this is something that I actually haven't tried in the field as yet, but David Lindemann actually gave me this tip. So, most of the time we try to use the autofocus and sometimes, as you say, you hit it. If you can actually turn off your autofocus manually on the lens using, the switch on your housing, and it locks, so then it doesn't try to hunt anymore. And I'm going to try that, right here in my lab and see how it works, and see if I get better results. I suffer a lot with that. I would lock onto a subject, that exact same salesman, Benny, on the flower gardens. I stalked him for 35 minutes of gas, and I probably have 10 seconds of usable footage because he would just get out of focus. I promise you. At least,
manual focus is very easy to understand. You take it off of autofocus, and then you establish it exactly where it wants to, and it's going to stay there. If your subject moves closer or farther away, it's going to get out of focus. That's just the way it is. Or maybe if you're able to change the focus during that time frame, you can adjust. But manual focus is for the real people. that
Yeah.
the pros.
And I've done manual focus. I got focus gears on the house in the same way. So some things I've done it, but you know, we all get simplified with our gear underwater because we're doing other things, and we try to hit that out of focus, and it just sometimes doesn't work. But I'm gonna try switching off my autofocus and see what manual works for my next trip.
Well, quite frankly, manual.
That's what I was talking about. Setting up the camera, still doesn't focus with autofocus, but it only does it once.
Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't change it, and while you're videoing, if it does move, you can hit that back button again to have it refocus.
Yeah, what he was saying, he didn't have the microphone on. It's basically when you're doing the back button autofocus, you set it where you want it and you hit it, and it won't change during that clip. And then I guess can you actually reset it during the film? Yeah. Yeah, if something moves around, you just reposition, hit the back button again, and it will lock back on what it is. So there's a lot of autofocusing is it's a very difficult subject, and you just have to have a lot of experience and finally find something that works for you and use it. I've been pretty successful using what I do. To be honest with you, manual focusing scares the hell out of me. I don't think I would ever do it. Now, I do like the point focus as long as you have something that's not moving around a lot. So I set it on a single point. You can move that sensor point around inside a while. It takes a little while to get it set up, but once you're set up and you have a good subject, it'll do a very, very good job. Okay, let's talk about other ways to achieve, I call these cheats.
I'm calling these cheats, but I could easily just call them good practical tips. Why a tripod? Well, if your camera is moving around, it's much more difficult to maintain focus. If you're experiencing chronic problems with bad focus, you might want to go with a wider lens or to zoom out some on your zoom lens. Greater depth of field will only help. Small f-stops like f2.8 or 3.5 have a very narrow depth of field. Changing to f8 or f11 will really improve the depth of field. I've mentioned this before, but it really can't be emphasized too much. Good diving skills improve everything, even your ability to get good focus. I think most of us have experienced wild currents or surge. It's difficult or almost impossible to do good macro under these conditions. Options? Well, go with a wider lens or just punt. Go get some hot chocolate and wait for things to calm down. It's essential that you understand your camera's capabilities. Set your controls for the most effective autofocus mode. Don't wait until you get home to review your work. Even reviewing your clips on the back of your camera is instructive. If you've brought a PC, download your clips and review them when you can. If you see something you like, then repeat it. If you see something that you don't like, then figure out how to avoid it in the future. Don't be complacent or headstrong. Don't be afraid to ask others for advice or help. And like I said before, YouTube is your friend. Everything that you want to know, you can probably find on YouTube. Well, that's it for today. I'm done. You Zoomers can take yourself off of mute now. If there are questions or comments, I'll try to stay around as long as we can, and maybe I'll have some answers for you, or maybe I won't. Thank you very much for attending today's workshop. I hope you got something out of it.
All right, let's see if I can get us all on the screen. Stop sharing. All right, you people out in Zoom land, it's your turn to start asking questions.
I'll go quick. So well done, Dennis. That was awesome. I like it's for dummies and not for dummies. I definitely learned a lot and very thoroughly prepared with some of the demonstrations with focus. I think that's key. I think you also gave me a tip not to delete my shitty footage because it can be used for demonstration purposes. So I'm gonna go to my recycle bin and take everything out now. I'll blame you for my storage problems. So no, well done, well done.
Thank you.
I would have a question, Dennis. Do you use a GoPro a lot for macro?
I don't use it very much for macro, Suzanne. Typically, I have my house system, my Olympus inside my housing, and I put my GoPro on top, and I will have two things established. I'll have the mid-water red filter and the deeper water red filter on it. I don't bother with the diopters right now if I have it on top of my camera, because usually my camera is better at doing macro than my GoPro is. But if a whale shark comes by and I'm on macro, you know where I'm going to go.
Okay, thanks a lot for this video. So I learned a lot. Thanks.
I guess it's getting close to 12 there, isn't it?
Yeah, or no, it's 11 now.
Okay.
Dennis?
Yes.
On your, what lens do you use mostly underwater? I mean, I have the 6-day I use, and I also use my 12-40 Pro with a dome, and I find that easier to use for video attempts I make.
You're using the 12 to 44 kit lens, right?
Yeah, the Pro lens, 12 to 40 Pro.
I have that one, but I also have the Pro 10 to 40. And typically I'll use my 10 to 40. Sometimes I'll put a +2 diopter on it because it lets me get a little bit closer, more into the macro range with that Pro lens.
And that's just a Tiffin lens on your lens inside?
Yes, yeah, it's like a 65 millimeter on it. Put it on there, and I can still get out to infinity with it because it's behind a dome port, which adds more depth of field with the dome port.
Okay, do you shoot any wide angle with any of the wide angle lenses? Do you use any of those?
Yeah, I have the Tokina 10 to 14, which I like a lot. It's a fisheye lens. It lets everything to be in focus. I think you saw that Kraken that I bought, the wet wide angle lens that I have that's a wet lens. That one allowed me to focus on everything right up to the edge of the port. So I don't have to worry about anything being out of focus. Everything's in focus. But if I want to be getting close to things, I need to basically be right on top of it and adjusting my lights so that I'm not missing them as well. That would have been really good for when I was doing the Blackwater video, which turned out to be a real fiasco for me. It's really hard, very difficult to get things to lock focus at night.
Yeah, I was trying to use a 60 on the one Blackwater dive that we did, and I had my strobes weren't working. I had one strobe. Only thing I could focus on was the rope with the lights hanging on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
all right. Thank you very much. Nice job, Dennis.
Well, thank you very much, Barry.
I'd just like to say something.
Yes,
Dennis, I can't thank you enough for tonight. This has affirmed how much I actually know, which is great. And you've also highlighted how much I still have to learn, which is great. So thank you very much from Scotland.
Well, I appreciate you, my forebears, my Scottish forebears. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Paul, up there in Dallas, how'd it go?
Good. I thought the presentation was awesome. Big walk away was tomorrow during our presentation. I'm converting the video to 24 frames per second, like you recommended, so you don't get the jitters with Zoom. That's a huge recommendation. So thank you. Very nicely done today.
Let me make a comment on that, Paul, and I think for everybody else. The way that most video cameras work is that the shutter speed is twice the frames per second. If you're shooting at 24, you're basically using a shutter speed of about 1/50th. And when things move around very fast inside that, 1/50th is just not very good about getting good focus on it. So each frame is going to be blurred with motion blur. If you're shooting at 60 frames a second, your shutter speed is 120. things are, every individual cell that you're doing in that 120 frames per second is going to be much sharper than when you're shooting at 24 frames per second. You understand what I'm talking about?
Sorry, let me rephrase that question. So on Zoom, you're streaming at 30 or 24 frames
Well,
per
I'm saying
second?
Zoom, okay. Yeah, Zoom is basically 24. Don't ever try to use a video at 30 because what happens is that it stresses the Zoom engine and then it has to convert down to 24 and it slows everything down. Bit rate is everything. Use 24 frames a second on everything that you use for video and don't use a high quality. You want to dumb it down if you can. People online are not going to see the difference anyway.
Are you doing 720 or 1080? So
I'm
you
doing,
can have good.
yeah, we're doing 1K, 1080p.
Perfect.
Thank
you.
All right. Well,
This is Ron. Thinking of bit rate, you want to talk about SD cards?
yes, I think that would be an interesting thing to more. He brings up a very good point. If you're using a GoPro, and especially if you're shooting at the maximum sensor size, the 5K or the 5.3K, and if you're using like 60 frames a second, you're pushing a lot of information onto that that SD card. You need a minimum of the highest quality, fastest SD card you can, the 10X or the, what is it called, a 10 something or the other, class 10. Yeah, the UHS-3. I buy the best I can. And that way, there are too many times I've been shooting underwater with my GoPro and about 30 seconds into a shot, it fills up the buffer and then it shuts down. So and that's because the card just wasn't capable of keeping up. I don't think it was getting too hot. I know Mike was worried about GoPros getting hot, but I think that there's enough heat transfer underwater that it's not going to happen.
Don't try to save money on SD cards.
Don't save money on SD cards. In fact, bring a bunch of them. I really,
We had a good point a while back and get one with tons of storage. That way.
Oh, we need to shut it down, guys. Okay.
That way you're not having to swap cards all the time.
Okay, everybody, we're leaving. They're about ready to shut the doors. Thank you very much out there in Zoom land. I appreciate you showing up. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you so much.
And we'll
Thank
see you
you.
later. Bye-bye. I'm
Bye.
leaving now.
So guys.